DeAndre Wilkins had just returned home after a grueling business trip. It wasn't the kind of exhaustion that knocks you out. It was the quiet, heavy kind that settles deep in your bones. At 32, DeAndre was proud of what he had built. A peaceful life, a modest single-story home on Echo Street in Bakersfield, California, and a routine that brought him peace. It was just after 1 p.m. on a warm Thursday. The street was quiet, the sun steady. As DeAndre pulled into his driveway, his dog Milo barked eagerly from behind the front door. The moment he stepped inside, he dropped his small carry-on by the entryway, knelt down and hugged Milo, a stubby-tailed brindle with a heart of gold. Milo spun in a happy circle, then bolted straight to the backyard. DeAndre followed with a glass of iced tea in one hand and his portable speaker in the other. He queued up some smooth Dexter Gordon saxophone, his kind of calm, and settled into his favorite spot in the backyard. This little square of land was more than grass and fence. It was his reward. 5 years ago, after saving every dollar he could, he bought this home. No parties, no drama. Just quiet evenings, a clean lawn, and a life he'd earned. But peace doesn't always last. Halfway through his drink, DeAndre noticed a woman approaching the back fence. She wore a beige sun visor, oversized sunglasses, and one of those portable neck fans swaying from a lanyard. Oddly, she wasn't passing by. She was walking toward his yard. DeAndre turned the music down slightly and stood. "Afternoon," he said politely. She didn't return the greeting. Her tone was sharp. "What exactly are you doing here? This is private property." DeAndre blinked, taken aback. "Ma'am, this is my property." She frowned, clearly unconvinced. "No, it's not. I know who lives here, and it's definitely not you." He let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "I've lived here for 5 years. I can show you my ID or mail if you'd like." Her hand hovered over her phone. "I'm calling the police. There's a suspicious man in the backyard." Milo gave a low bark from the patio. DeAndre instinctively reached out to keep him calm. "You're calling the police on me, at my own home? You can explain yourself to the officers," she snapped, already dialing. DeAndre stood still. He knew better than to make any sudden moves. He'd seen this scene play out too many times, in real life and on the news. From her end of the call, he could hear snippets. "Yes, Bakersfield, black male, trespassing, possibly armed." "You're lying," DeAndre said, locking eyes with her. "You know I live here." But she kept talking. Minutes later, the sound of sirens pierced the quiet. 2 squad cars pulled up quickly. DeAndre had barely moved, his wallet now in hand, his palms visible. He walked slowly to the front yard, standing tall, doing everything not to appear as a threat. Milo stayed inside. "Sir, stay where you are," one officer shouted. DeAndre raised his hands. "I live here. I can prove it." Neighbors peeked from behind blinds and cracked doors. But the attention wasn't on the woman who made the call. It was all on him. One of the officers, tall with a shaved head and mirrored sunglasses, approached with caution. His hand hovered near his holster. The second officer, shorter and stockier, flanked him, eyes scanning like something bigger was about to happen. "My name is DeAndre Wilkins," he said calmly. "This is my house. I have ID and mail with this address." The taller officer gave a small nod. "Do you have that on you now?" "Yeah." DeAndre slowly pulled out his wallet and handed over his license. The officer compared it to the mailbox number. That's when the woman, Carolyn Dittmer, rounded the corner, her phone held like a trophy. "Officers, thank you. I caught him in the backyard. He was acting suspicious. I've never seen him before." The second officer turned to her. "Ma'am, do you live on the street?" I live just across the alley. I walk by this house every day. DeAndre raised an eyebrow. So, you don't live on this street, and you admit you walked onto my property? Carolyn ignored him. I knew the woman who used to live here. She was sweet. He's not the owner. Look at him. He doesn't belong here. 6 words. Just 6. But they revealed everything. The taller officer turned back to DeAndre. Sir, can we step inside so you can show us some mail or a deed? DeAndre nodded. Yeah, I also have a doorbell cam. You'll see everything. He led the officers inside, but when Carolyn tried to follow, he blocked her path. You're not coming into my home, he said firmly. You've done enough. The officer raised a hand. Ma'am, we don't need you in there. Inside, DeAndre walked to the counter and grabbed 2 unopened envelopes addressed to him. Then he opened the security app on his phone. The footage was clear. Carolyn walking into his yard, confronting him, calling 911. Jazz still hummed faintly in the background. After a tense pause, the taller officer exhaled. This all checks out. The shorter one nodded toward the door. We'll have a word with her outside. They stepped out, DeAndre locking his door behind them. Carolyn stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed. So, what's the verdict? The officer's voice was firm. Ma'am, Mr. Wilkins owns this home. He has valid ID, mail, and security footage proving his account. Her face twitched. But he doesn't look like. That's enough. The officer cut her off. You made a false report and trespassed onto private property. Wait, I trespassed? I was protecting the neighborhood. You crossed his fence without permission. That's trespassing, he repeated. You're lucky he's not pressing charges. DeAndre watched her confidence fade. The certainty she had when she made that call was cracking. I'll talk to the HOA, she muttered. I'm sure you will, DeAndre replied. And so will everyone else, once I post the video. She turned and walked away, stiff and muttering. One of the officers looked back at DeAndre. Sorry about the misunderstanding. DeAndre didn't say a word. He just nodded once and walked back to his front door. But both he and the neighborhood knew this wasn't over. Not yet. What happened next pushed everything far beyond Echo Street. Inside his house, DeAndre stood frozen in the entryway, staring at the door he'd just locked behind him. Milo padded over quietly, ears tucked back, sensing the tension in the air. DeAndre crouched to pet him, running his fingers through Milo's thick fur like it was a grounding wire. His hands were still warm, not from the sun, but from adrenaline. He picked up his phone and replayed the doorbell camera footage. Everything was there. Caroline's clipped tone, the way she glanced around like she was waiting for backup, how she walked into his yard like she owned it, and that call, her steady voice dialing 911 like she'd rehearsed it. But the best part? The moment the officer told her she was trespassing. DeAndre uploaded the video to the cloud, saved a backup to a USB drive, and sat down. He didn't know if he'd post it. Not yet, but he wasn't going to let it sit in silence either. That night, he called his sister in Fresno. You're not going to believe what happened, he said. He told her everything, from the moment Caroline showed up to how the officers questioned him like he didn't belong. You recorded it, right? She asked. Every second. Then you need to post that. People need to see. DeAndre hesitated. I don't want this turning into a viral circus. I just wanted one quiet day. She was quiet for a moment. You didn't ask for this. But if you stay quiet, she wins twice. You're not the first guy this has happened to. You might be the first one who can prove it. That stuck. The next morning, DeAndre edited the video. No music. No graphics. Just raw footage and a short caption. She told me to leave my own house, then called the cops. He posted it on Facebook, just for friends. Maybe it'd spark a few conversations. By noon, it had over 3,000 shares. By 3 p.m., it had landed on Twitter, where a Bakersfield activist group tagged him with a message. This is why porch cameras matter. This is why we speak up. By the time he was making dinner, a journalist had already emailed asking for an interview. He declined. But it didn't matter anymore. The video was out in the wild. A high school classmate he hadn't spoken to in a decade texted, "Bro, I saw you on Instagram. You okay?" Another comment read, "My cousin had this happen in Modesto. No footage, though." Nobody believed him. By Friday morning, a local news station aired a segment. They blurred Caroline's face, but not her voice. Her words echoed across TV screens like they were being broadcast straight from people's living rooms. He doesn't belong here. DeAndre had gone from a quiet afternoon in his backyard to becoming a symbol for something much bigger. It wasn't a role he chose, but it had chosen him. Caroline didn't say a word. No apology. No letter. Just silence from across the alley. But it wasn't peaceful. It felt like something had cracked. Where there used to be waves and nods, there was now cold distance. But that silence wouldn't last. Saturday morning, while DeAndre was watering his lawn, a white SUV slowed in front of his house. The window rolled down. A woman in her 50s with gold-rimmed glasses and kind eyes leaned out. "You're DeAndre, right?" she asked gently. He nodded. "Yeah, that's me. I'm Loretta McKinnon. I live 2 streets over. I saw your video. I just wanted to say, thank you." He lowered the hose. "You're welcome, I guess. Wasn't planning on all this attention." "I get that, but it hit home. My husband passed last year. I've lived here since '92, and lately, I've had more people second-guess me than in the last decade combined." She looked down, then back at him. "I know what it's like to feel like you have to prove you belong somewhere. If you ever need anything seriously, you're not alone." DeAndre gave her a real nod. It was the first kind gesture since the video went viral. And it wasn't the last. By Monday, more neighbors approached. Carefully. Quietly. Tyrell, a retired Navy vet who'd lived on Echo Street for 17 years. A white couple in their 40s. Embarrassed they hadn't said anything when they saw the flashing police lights. But along with support came the stares. Conversations that stopped when he walked by. Eyes that flicked away too fast. Then came the flyer taped to the neighborhood mailbox. In big, bold letters, "Know who lives in your neighborhood." Underneath it, a screenshot from the video, DeAndre mid-sentence. Someone had drawn a question mark on his forehead. He stared at it, jaw clenched, then tore it down and walked home. That evening, a knock came at the door. It was Officer Delgado, the shorter one from the incident. "Mind if I talk to you for a minute?" DeAndre stepped aside. Delgado sat on the porch steps. "I saw the video. I'm not gonna lie, it looks bad. I can't speak for Officer Langston, but we're not trained to assume guilt. That's not how it's supposed to go." DeAndre sat too, arms on his knees. "Felt like guilt to me." Delgado nodded slowly. "Yeah, you're right. I'm not here to defend it. Just wanted to let you know. It sparked a department review." "You here as a cop or just trying to get ahead of the media storm?" "A bit of both," Delgado admitted. "But mostly, as a person. I wish we'd done better." Before he left, he handed DeAndre a photo, an anonymous letter sent to the department. Same handwriting as the flyer. "This neighborhood doesn't need troublemakers." DeAndre stared at it. He wasn't sure what bothered him more, the cowardice, or the idea that he was the problem. By Tuesday, the video wasn't just local anymore, it was national. A prominent civil rights advocate reposted it. A verified journalist tweeted, "You can own a home, a mortgage, a title, and still be treated like a suspect." News outlets from LA to Minneapolis picked it up. Black homeowner confronted in his own yard. Neighbor calls cops for sitting outside. DeAndre hadn't asked for a movement, but it had found him. Messages poured in. A woman from Nevada. 12 years in my house and my neighbor still calls me new. Thank you for speaking up. A man in Tulsa. They questioned me after a jog. Said I looked out of place. This hit me hard, man. Even a white man from Connecticut messaged. 5 years ago, I might have thought like her, but now I see it. I'm sorry. Every message added weight to a burden DeAndre never asked to carry. Thursday was the tipping point. Channel 12 showed up at his door. "Mr. Wilkins, we're doing a story on racial profiling in suburban neighborhoods. Would you be willing to speak on camera?" He didn't want to, but then he thought of Caroline, still walking the block like nothing happened. He stepped onto the porch. "You've got 5 minutes." That night, the clip aired. No anger, no drama, just DeAndre in plain clothes speaking plainly. "I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I didn't trespass. I sat in my backyard and listened to music. And for that, someone saw me as a threat." The next morning, his inbox was flooded. A civil rights attorney, Simone Lackey, offered a free consultation. "You don't have to sue," she wrote. But what happened wasn't just wrong, it was illegal. At the same time, the HOA started hearing complaints. Some neighbors were calling for Caroline to be removed from her committee. Whispers emerged. This wasn't her first confrontation. It was just the first one caught on camera. The neighborhood Facebook group exploded. Arguments, deleted posts, divided lines. One post read, "This kind of drama is why we moved here. To avoid it." DeAndre screenshot it. He didn't reply, but he felt the sting in every word. That weekend, a small group showed up on his sidewalk with signs. "We stand with DeAndre." Some brought lawn chairs. Some just sat silently. One woman said she drove in from Visalia just to support. "This kind of thing doesn't stay quiet anymore," she told him. "And it shouldn't." DeAndre nodded. He was beginning to understand the bigger picture. But understanding and acting on it were two very different things. And the pressure to act was only growing. The meeting ended quietly, but a small group lingered near the parking lot afterward. DeAndre noticed a few familiar faces. Neighbors who'd always offered polite nods or the occasional wave, but rarely more. Tonight, though, they weren't just passing by. They were talking. One of them, an older man named Wesley, slowly made his way over. Retired, usually reserved, Wesley rarely spoke beyond pleasantries. But now his expression was different. Somber. Sincere. "I'll be honest with you, DeAndre," he said. "I used to think this kind of thing didn't happen here. Thought it was just online noise. But after seeing that footage, hearing her words, I felt sick." DeAndre nodded, grateful for the honesty. "Thanks," he said. "That means more than you know." Wesley hesitated, then added, "If you ever want to speak to the neighborhood association, not just the board, but the residents, we'd listen. Some folks are ready to hear it straight from you." That night, back home, DeAndre found himself pacing. Could he really become that person? The one who speaks up, challenges the status quo, stands in uncomfortable truth? It wasn't just about what happened to him anymore. The messages, the flyers, the neighbors who remained silent, and those who had started to speak. Something bigger was shifting. Milo, his dog, lay calmly by his feet. Just as DeAndre sat down, his phone buzzed again. Another message. This one was from a youth outreach group. They wanted him to come talk to students at a local high school. He rubbed the back of his neck, uncertain. But each new message made it harder to stay quiet. What came next would demand a decision, and he couldn't dodge it forever. A few days later, he found himself in a quiet cafe off Stockdale Highway, sitting across from Simone Lackey, the civil rights attorney who had reached out the week before. She had a composed, observant demeanor, professional, but not cold. "I know you didn't ask for any of this," she said. "But what happened wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a violation of your civil rights." DeAndre let out a breath. "If I file a complaint, take legal action, what does that make me? Some guy looking for a payout? Stirring the pot?" Simone leaned forward slightly. "No, it makes you someone holding the system accountable. It tells others this isn't okay, and maybe, just maybe, it prevents the next one." He looked out the window. A group of teenagers were laughing as they crossed the street. Unbothered, free. "I'm not even mad anymore," he said. "I'm just tired. Tired of having to prove I belong. Of thinking through every move when I walk out my front door. Now I've got to decide if I want to be the guy who sues the HOA and the city." That's a lot. It is, she agreed. But doing nothing is also a choice, and that carries its own weight. That evening, the neighborhood felt oddly still. Not calm, just muted, like everyone was waiting to see what he'd do next. He sat on the porch, Milo curled beside him again, when the phone rang. Hello. Hi, this is April Stanton with the Echo Street Unity Committee. We're hosting a community forum, just a space for honest conversations. We'd love for you to come and speak. Nothing formal, just talk. DeAndre hesitated. Is Carolyn going to be there? A pause. She was invited. She declined. He figured as much. I'll think about it. Of course, no pressure. Sunday evening, at the old community church. We're trying to build bridges. Sunday came. DeAndre parked in the back lot of a small brick church on Bernard Street. Inside, rows of folding chairs replaced pews. No microphones, no stage, just people. Maybe 50 or 60, some familiar, some strangers. Sandra Alvarez welcomed everyone, then opened the floor. DeAndre stayed quiet at first. He listened. One by one, people spoke, sharing stories of bias, silence, assumptions they'd made or endured. A young woman stood and said, I never understood what a microaggression was until I saw that video. DeAndre cleared his throat. I'll say something. Every head turned. He stood slowly, walked to the front. I didn't post that video to start drama, he began. I just didn't want to be erased. He told them about buying his home, about the accusations, about the feeling of being seen not as a neighbor but as a threat. This isn't just about Carolyn, he said. It's about how fast people are to assume the worst when someone doesn't look like them. How easy it is to pick up a phone instead of asking a question. Some nodded. Others stared at the floor. I'm not perfect. I've made assumptions too. But this experience taught me something. Silence can be louder than words. So, I'm choosing to speak. Soft claps followed. Then more joined in. Afterward, neighbors approached. Some shook his hand. Others simply whispered, Thank you. As he walked back to his car, for the first time in weeks, he felt something close to clarity. He still didn't know if he'd sue. But he knew this. He wasn't going to shrink to fit anyone's comfort ever again. But standing tall had its cost. And the choices ahead would define more than just his future. The story from that night spread, not through news or social media, but through conversation. Those who were there told others. And suddenly, DeAndre wasn't just the guy in the video. He was a voice they couldn't ignore. The next day, an email came from a history teacher at Bakersfield High. My students saw a clip of your speech. Would you consider speaking to our senior civics class? They're having a hard time believing this still happens in 2025. Your story might help them understand. DeAndre stared at the message. He hadn't asked for any of this, but now it was his. He replied, Yes. The classroom was warm. Sunlight streamed through half-closed blinds. The students looked half-engaged at first, phones in hand, heads down. But as he began speaking, their eyes lifted. I'm not a politician, not an activist, he said. I'm just a guy who came home to play jazz in his yard and ended up being treated like he didn't belong. He told them about the confrontation, the cops, the camera, the quiet that followed. A student raised her hand. Do you think she really believed you didn't live there? Or was she just pretending? DeAndre thought for a moment. I think she believed what made her feel in control. That's the dangerous part. People don't always see what's real. They see what justifies their fear. Another asked, What if you didn't have a camera? He paused. That's the question I keep asking myself. Honestly, I don't know. But I probably wouldn't be standing here. The room fell silent. Afterward, a few students approached him. One shook his hand and said, I'm gonna ask my dad some real questions tonight. Back home, DeAndre found a note taped to his front door. No envelope, no signature, just careful cursive. I watched your speech. I didn't clap because I didn't know how. But I'm learning. And I'm sorry. A neighbor. He stood on the porch, the letter in hand, staring at the street. It looked the same, but it felt different. Not healed, but shifting. Later that week, Simone called. "Just checking in," she said. "Any thoughts on the legal side?" "I'm thinking," he said. "But I also think there's something more powerful than just dragging people to court." "Like what?" "Making sure they can't pretend it didn't happen. Not just Carolyn. All the people who thought it was okay. Or didn't think at all." He'd started writing things down. Every message, every story someone shared. The notebook was filling fast. And one thing became clear. This wasn't rare. This wasn't a fluke. It was just the first time someone caught it on camera and refused to stay quiet. A month after the incident, the HOA sent out a formal notice. Carolyn Dittmer had stepped down. No apology. No statement. Just gone. DeAndre didn't expect anything more. Some neighbors still kept their distance. Others reached out. A few invited him for coffee or to speak at their churches. The journey wasn't over, but the silence was. And DeAndre? He wasn't going anywhere. DeAndre never set out to be a spokesperson. But after everything that had happened, he understood something now. Sometimes just telling the truth out loud is its own form of leadership. Still, truth without action fades. And before this chapter could close, there was one final thing he needed to say. It was a quiet evening, about 5 weeks after it all began. DeAndre sat on his back patio, just like he had that first day. Same chair, same Bluetooth speaker playing the same mellow jazz. Milo lay nearby, stretched out and snoring softly. The backyard hadn't changed. But to DeAndre, it felt completely different now. He took a slow sip from a cold glass and opened his notebook. A fresh page, blank. He thought about writing a polished speech, something meaningful. But instead, he picked up his phone, opened the camera, and hit record. This time, it wasn't for the media. It wasn't for a meeting or a classroom. It was just for him. "Hey," he began, voice steady. "It's DeAndre. I've been quiet the last few days, just trying to process everything. Trying to make sense of it all." He paused, eyes flicking to the camera. "I didn't ask to be a headline. I wasn't trying to prove a point. I just wanted to sit in my own backyard and play some music with my dog. That's it." And someone decided that was suspicious. He shifted in his seat. Someone decided I didn't look like I belonged in the house I worked for, saved for, paid for, and live in. You can talk about laws and policies and bias training, but this comes down to something much simpler. It's about how we choose to see each other, or how we choose not to. His expression stayed calm, but his voice dipped quieter. You don't have to understand everyone's story. You don't even have to like everyone. But you can't decide someone's worth or their rights based on what makes you feel comfortable. He let the silence stretch for a few seconds. There are so many people out there walking through the world with their guard up. People who feel like they have to explain their existence every time they step into a room. That pressure, it wears on you, quietly, until moments like mine happen. And suddenly, the silence breaks. DeAndre let out a slow breath. "I'm not a victim, but I'm not gonna pretend it didn't hurt. It did. It still does. But maybe that pain means something. If it wakes people up. If it makes even one person pause before they assume." He leaned back, looked away from the lens for a moment, then ended the recording. He didn't post it right away. He saved it raw and unfiltered. Just him. A record of what it felt like to sit in his truth. A few days later, he finally uploaded it. No hashtags, no caption, just the video. The response wasn't viral. It was quiet, but it was real. Comments trickled in. "I needed this. Thank you. You put into words what so many of us are too tired to explain. My dad watched this, didn't say a word, but I think it hit him. That matters." DeAndre didn't feel like he had won. This wasn't about winning, but something had shifted. He saw what it looked like when people stopped pretending things were fine and started having real conversations. He never pressed charges. He didn't file a lawsuit. Instead, he partnered with a local housing justice group and helped organize monthly community meetups. Open conversations. No microphones. Just folding chairs and people, neighbors, officers, teachers, sitting in a circle and talking. The first meeting had 12 people. The third had over 30. And DeAndre kept his notebook. He filled more pages, stories, names, questions, small victories. And he kept that old jazz speaker because that backyard was still his. Always would be. Sometimes, change doesn't arrive with fanfare. Sometimes, it shows up in quiet moments. When a voice, long silenced, is finally heard. When a neighbor looks at you differently, not with suspicion, but with recognition. When a space that once felt cold begins to feel like home again. If the story made you pause, even just for a moment, then let it be the start of something. Speak up. Ask better questions. Be a better neighbor. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Because there are more stories to tell. And we're just getting started.